Sometimes in life, we do things we might not be proud of. But honestly, if I had to go back and do it all again, I wouldn't change a thing. Please listen to my story and let me know if you think I did the right thing. It's been a crazy ride. I'm Delilah, and I grew up as an orphan. When I was only 5 years old, my parents were arrested as they belonged to some kind of mafia. I didn't have any relatives, so I was sent to an orphanage. I was too young to really understand it all. I just thought my parents were so busy with work, they didn't have time to take care of me. But later, I understood that my parents were bad people, and that they'd often hit me and even starved me whenever I was naughty. Over the next 4 years, I was adopted by 3 different families. The first 2 didn't end so well, so they sent me back. But the third family was really nice. Unfortunately, luck wasn't on our side, though. There was a car accident. I was lucky enough to survive, but my adoptive parents didn't make it. I was devastated and got sent back to the orphanage. I didn't understand why I was so unlucky. It really felt like the universe was punishing me. Years passed by and no other families adopted me. So as soon as I turned 18, I left and decided to start on my own. But it wasn't easy. I'd had no real education and I couldn't find a decent job. I did a lot of random jobs, like pizza deliveries, handing out flyers on the streets, and working in a supermarket for a bit too. The money was never enough, though. I hate to admit this, but sometimes I stole groceries from work. However, one time I got caught, and of course, they fired me. That sucked. How would I be able to make it to tomorrow with $2 in my wallet now? I vented out with my coworker Casey about how miserable my life would be without that job. Then Casey just smirked at me and said she knew another way I could make some money. She said it was just a one-time thing and it would be risky, but the money would be enough to last me for years. I was eager to hear more, but you won't believe what it was. The job was to kidnap the daughter of a rich family and then demand ransom. Casey said all I had to do was take care of the kid for a few days in an abandoned warehouse, and when the parents paid the ransom, they'd send the kid back, and I'd be free to go with all the money. I mean, it sounded easy, right? It's not like I was actually kidnapping her. I was just taking care of her for a few days. More like a babysitter, so nothing could go wrong, right? The little girl was called Lisa, and she was just 2 years old. Her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, were well known, and they were stinkin' rich. The plan was actually so simple. Every Sunday, her nanny took her to the playground, and so that's where she'd be kidnapped from. You're probably wondering if it worked out. Well, I'm not in jail right now, so there you have it. I was waiting in the warehouse, and they delivered Lisa to me. Now, all we have to do is wait. The warehouse was pretty shabby, but it had enough to survive. And at first, Lisa cried a lot, and I seriously couldn't get her to stop. I tried playing her Baby Shark on YouTube. Believe it or not, it worked, and she stopped immediately. Later that night, though, Casey called and said Lisa's parents refused to pay and that the police were involved. Oh my gosh! So now what? They couldn't just leave me here with this random kid. The only option Casey could think of was that me and Lisa should hide out at Casey's grandparents' farm for a couple of years. That's when the case died down and everyone had forgotten about it. We could just leave Lisa outside a police station. This was insane! But what choice did I have? Lisa's face was now plastered on every newspaper and webpage. Also, not to mention the fact I knew nothing about raising a kid. What a disaster! But hey, at least I'd get to move to a farm. So the next morning, Casey's cousin, who drives vegetables from the farm to the city, picked us up and drove us safely to the farm. It was perfect, because Casey's grandparents didn't own a TV or the internet, so they knew nothing about the missing kid. Casey told them I was a single mom and had nowhere else to live, so they warmly welcomed us and said in return I could help them out on the farm. Those first few weeks were torture. Lisa was so naughty. Every time I fed her, she'd throw her food around. And once, she threw a hot bowl of soup over my head. After that, I was tempted to let her starve. I couldn't handle it. To be honest, I hated her. I regretted so bad getting involved in this mess every time I saw her face. But then one night, she was lying on the bed and I was impressed. She'd finally chilled out. I went to wake her up to take her down for dinner, and she was on fire! I started panicking and went to find a thermometer, and her temp was 39 degrees Celsius. I had to get her fever down. I asked Casey's grandparents to help me buy some medicine for her. I was seriously panicking because she was shaking now. I just picked her up and held her in my arms, and I realized I would protect this little girl no matter what. She looked so innocent, and I actually felt my heart open up to her. We must have fallen asleep because I suddenly woke up an hour or so later and was relieved to see her body temp was back to normal. After that, I felt closer to Lisa. And honestly, she was pretty cute. Soon, I was sewing her little dresses and cooking her favorite foods. We actually had so much in common. We both loved mac and cheese, hated carrots, and were addicted to chocolate. Pretty soon, a year had flown by, and Lisa was starting to speak. And then she started to sing. And oh man, she's the most adorable thing on earth. Then one day, she turned to me and said, "Mama." I almost cried. I felt so happy, but it wasn't right. I had to give her back to her parents. She didn't deserve to live a life away from them, like I had with my parents. So I did something crazy. I saw Lisa's parents were looking for a part-time maid, so I used a fake name and applied for the job. I wanted to see if it was safe to take Lisa back without getting caught, but it was immediately clear that something wasn't right. It was like they didn't even miss her. I mean, imagine if your child had been kidnapped. Surely you'd be crying a lot, right? This family was different. All they seemed to do was work. It was so easy to sneak around their house. They left for work at 9 a.m. every morning and would only come back at 7 p.m. The only one I had to be careful of was Mrs. Garcia, the housekeeper. One day, I was searching for Lisa's room to see if I could get some of her toys, but I couldn't find it anywhere. There wasn't a single room that looked like it belonged to a 2-year-old. Had they seriously already packed up her room? Just given up hope? So, I decided to search the basement, and jackpot! I found a box full of toys. But that's not the only thing that was there. There was a crumpled up photo, too. I got curious and unfolded it, and saw a little girl in the photo. I froze. That little girl wasn't Lisa. She was about 5 years old and looked familiar. It's like I've seen her before. Could it be? Is that me? But why did Lisa's parents have a photo of me? Suddenly, Mrs. Garcia appeared and said, "What are you doing down here? I knew there was something fishy about you. I'm going to call Mr. Taylor." She quickly took out her phone and was about to dial his number. I grabbed it from her, but oh man, this old lady was strong. We were fighting over her phone, and then she let it go. She looked shocked and pointed at me, then in a trembling voice said, You are Delilah, aren't you?" I was stunned. How did she know my real name? Oh God, she must have known I'd kidnapped Lisa. I was probably about to go to jail. But then she continued speaking, and I thought I was going to faint. Lisa's parents were also my biological parents, which made Lisa my sister. Mrs. Garcia had recognized me because she saw the scar on my arm, which she said I'd got from falling out of a tree. She'd worked for my family since before I was even born. But then she said something that shocked me even more. "Don't come back to this family, Delilah. Please, it's for your own good. If you stay, you'll be in danger like poor little Lisa. They didn't care about her at all. They often left her starving, and then she got kidnapped. They haven't even bothered to look for her. They're cruel and heartless, and all they care about is money. Having a kid was just part of the cover-up for them and their illegal business. I really hope Lisa is in a safe place now. Anything is better than this family." Oh my God. This was seriously crazy. After all these years, I'd finally found my parents. But deep down, I knew Mrs. Garcia was right. If Lisa and I came back, our lives would be hell. Before I left the room, I asked Mrs. Garcia one last question. Did my parents look for me when they got out of jail? Mrs. Garcia shook her head sadly. Let's be honest, though. I knew the answer before I even asked. So I went back to the farm and continued to take care of Lisa. Now that I knew she was my sister, I loved her even more and promised myself that I'd give her the life she deserved. It's been 10 years now, and we're doing great. Our parents did do a bit of searching for Lisa, but only for like a month. Then they gave up. Mrs. Garcia had been right. They didn't care about Lisa or me. When it felt safe, Lisa and I moved to Canada. I started to work in a few different places and even took some classes. Turns out, I have a passion for plants, and I can thank my time on the farm for that. So I opened a small plant shop, and the business is going so well. Lisa is my motivation. She's the reason I work so hard and keep fighting for our lives. And now we're happier than we've ever been. When Lisa turns 18, I'm going to tell her everything. But for now, I'll let her think our parents aren't evil people and that they're just busy working in another country. So, what do you think? Would you agree I did the right thing? I think I did.
Hi guys, I'm Sam, and boy, do I have a crazy story to tell you. But first, let me ask you this. Have you ever pretended to be gay to get close to a girl? Don't adjust your ears, you heard me right. Crazy, huh? Well, go get yourself some popcorn and stay tuned, as I'm going to tell you all about it. It began with my childhood sweetheart, Jeanette. We were together for 9 years and had been living together for 4 years. The most commonly asked question our friends and family threw at me was, why haven't you proposed yet? I always made a joke of it and said something like, all in good time. But the truth was, we were both still so young, and I just didn't feel ready to take that plunge yet. But surely, we will get married eventually. Then one day at work, me and my team got high praise for a big project we'd aced. To celebrate, I invited them over to mine to have a celebratory pizza lunch break. I knew Jeanette was working from home, but I didn't think she'd mind. I mean, who wouldn't want pizza? I led my colleagues into my place saying, "Hi honey, I'm home." Then my foot ended up entangled in something and I almost fell over. I reached down to free myself and lifted a bra. That's when I saw that there was a trail of clothes all over the floor. Then I heard moaning sounds coming from the bedroom. Oh dear God, please no. If she was doing what I thought she was, I would slam my head to a wall. And guess what? I walked into the bedroom, and there was Jeanette, in our bed with some other dude. They were so preoccupied that they didn't even notice me, so I coughed loudly to get their attention. She looked completely shocked, then sputtered out, "Sam, what are you doing here? Aren't you working?" Wow, this girl even dared to question me? I replied, "Oh, now you suddenly care about me? Ain't I the one who should be asking what on earth you guys are doing? Can't believe this." Then I walked out of there and back into the living room where all of my colleagues were standing there gawping at me. Oh no, I'd forgotten about them. I tried to keep some sort of composure as I politely asked them to leave, and also said I may be a little bit late back to work. Then that dude appeared and started picking his clothes off the floor. I was so mad I grabbed his pants and one of his sneakers and chucked them in the trash. Ha! Have fun smelling of garbage all day, jerk. After he left, I asked Jeanette why she did it, but she showed no sign of guilt or shame. She just sat there reasoning that she'd been waiting for me to propose for years, but I never had. She wasn't getting any younger, and she felt like she was wasting her life with someone who didn't seem able to fully commit to her. What? This was absurd. Of course I planned on proposing. I mean, maybe in a year or two. She just needed to wait, but no. Instead, she cheated on me with a guy that didn't even come close to me on the looks front. I mean, come on. At least pick someone who looked like Captain America. Then it would be a fair competition. Of course, Jeanette and I broke up after that. Thank God I found out she was a cheater before I actually married her. What a lucky escape. Phew! Okay, who was I trying to kid? The reality is, I was heartbroken. And worse still, everyone at work knew what she'd done. The only thing keeping me going were ice cream-fueled nights in watching low-budget horror movies. On one such night, some of my guy friends showed up and insisted on taking me out. I didn't want to go anywhere, but my friends didn't take no for an answer. Before long, I was in a bar drinking a beer and listening to my gay friend go on about how amazing his boyfriend was. Thinking about it, maybe he had a point. Girls were bossy, controlling, and always seemed in a hurry to reach life milestones. But guys weren't like that. Suddenly, I had an idea. I was so done with girls, but the truth is, I was lonely. So why didn't I give dating a guy a go? Yeah, I know it sounded crazy, but whatever. Who knows, maybe I was really gay and destined to be with a guy? So, that evening when I got home, I downloaded a dating app and started swiping for my dream man. It wasn't long before I stumbled upon Grant. He was wearing a Stranger Things t-shirt, and he was attractive. Although not as good-looking as me, of course. We started chatting, and a few days later, he asked me out on a date, and I agreed. We went to some fast food restaurant and ate greasy burgers, which Jeanette hated. Then we talked about superhero movies, which Jeanette also hated. It was refreshing being out with someone that didn't count calories or turn their nose up at geeky references. I walked home feeling positive, but as I passed a bubble tea cafe, something fell through the air and soaked me. What the hell, and what was I tasting? It was really sweet. I looked at myself and, was that bubble tea? I couldn't believe it. Somebody had just thrown a cup of bubble tea on my head. I looked around me to find the culprit. That's when I saw some shocked-looking girl running over to me. She was muttering out something about being really sorry and how she was aiming at her boyfriend but missed. By this point, I was in a foul mood. So I said to her, "Girl, your aim is lousy." Then I walked off. Man, all girls do is cause me grief. I was so done with them. So when Grant asked me out on another date, I said yes. We ended up in some cafe so we could have a little chit-chat. Suddenly, Grant reached over and took my hand. Oh my God. What should I do? Should I pull my hand back? But that would be so rude. All I wanted was to quickly get out of this dilemma. So I rambled out something about remembering I had to meet my parents. Then I quickly got out of there. Okay, so I'd had a revelation. I 100% wasn't gay. Thank God we stopped at holding hands. If he tried to kiss me, I might have fainted from the shock. Suddenly, my phone beeped. It was a message from my annoying cousin James with a photo attached. Oh my God, it was me and Grant holding hands. How come I didn't notice that James was in the same cafe as us? His message read, "Give me your Avengers action figure collection or I'm sending this to your parents." What? Didn't he have better things to do than to blackmail me? No way I would give him my precious collection. If I saw him, I would have even given him a smack in the head for this childish move. I ignored his idle threats. That idiot couldn't scare me anyway. I decided I needed a break from dating. Maybe I needed a new hobby, such as reading. Yeah, reading would be a great way to distract myself. So the next day I went to the bookstore when suddenly I saw Jeanette. Oh great, what was she doing here? I freaked out, so I grabbed the nearest book to me and pretended to read it. Phew, she hadn't seen me, had she? Then suddenly I hear her voice saying, "Sam, is that you?" I lowered the book and forced a fake smile and greeted her back. Then she pointed at the book I was holding and said, "Is that for your niece?" Seeing her had made me all flustered, so I muttered out, "No, it's for me." She gave me a weird look, then said, "Oh, I didn't realize you were into those kinds of novels." What? I looked at the book I was holding. Oh, just great. I was holding the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. I was about to correct myself when suddenly some seriously handsome guy appeared and put his hand on Jeanette's waist. "Sam, this is Nick, my fiancé." She showed me the massive diamond ring on her finger. This Nick dude shook my hand. Well, he had a firm grip. Then they started giving each other lovey-dovey looks. This was my cue to leave, so I put that book down, muttered out a goodbye, and hurried out of there. Great. Jeanette had got herself some other hunk, and I was feeling like a loser. I needed to clear my head, so I went for a long walk and found myself at the lake where Jeanette and I went for our first date. Standing there, I remembered how a pigeon had pooped on her jacket, and I'd laughed so much I tripped and dropped my phone in the lake. Ah, the good old days. My memories were interrupted by the sounds of someone sobbing. That's when I spotted a crying girl sitting by the lake. Suddenly, she stood up and it looked like she was going to jump. Panic-stricken, I ran over to her and grabbed her arm to stop her. She got so startled that she punched me right in the face. My nose was bleeding and my mouth swelled up like I'd been stung by a swarm of bees. I screamed, "What the heck?" and gave the girl a dirty look. Oh my God, not her again. It was the bubble tea girl. What was it with me and this girl? She's surely bad news. Every time we met, I ended up getting hit. I'm sorry, but my body couldn't handle any of that anymore. And it seemed like she also recognized me, so she immediately apologized and asked if I was okay. I was super mad, so I yelled at her, "No, I'm not okay. And what on earth do you think you're doing? No matter how bad your problems are, you should never do such selfish things. Do you really want to leave this world all behind?" The girl gave me a weird look and said, "Huh? What are you talking about?" Turns out it was all a misunderstanding. She wasn't trying to jump in the lake. She just wanted to throw away the ring her boyfriend had given her. Oops. She told me how she'd caught him cheating on her at her birthday party. With her cousin. Ouch. I thought my ex was the worst. But her ex sounded like the jerkiest jerk ever. We grabbed a drink, not bubble tea, and sat by the lake and chatted for a while. It turns out she's actually all right. I mean, she's pretty cute and funny, and her favorite superhero is Black Widow. I mean, she's a kick-ass choice, and though, no, I think I might have a crush on her. By the time we said our goodbyes, she'd stopped crying and was actually smiling, so that meant she liked me too, right? As I walked home, I realized something. I'd forgotten to get her number. Oh, man, I was so stupid. And even her name was a mystery. I mean, it wasn't like she was actually called Bubble Tea Girl, so I couldn't even look her up. Real good job there, Sammy boy. Aren't you guys curious about if I ever got to know her name? Stay tuned for the next part. The fun is yet to come.
Hi everyone. Have you ever had someone get revenge on you? It's not fun, right? Well, this is my story about revenge, but with a twist. You won't believe who my prankster turned out to be. Oh, let me introduce myself. I'm Audrey, and I'm 24. To say I've had an unhappy life would be an understatement. Firstly, my dad ditched my mom for another woman. And not long after that, my mom passed away from a serious illness. Basically, my entire life fell apart in a matter of months, and I was still too young at that time. It was tough growing up, and I always think that my life could never turn the page again. But on one fine day, someone popped into my life and changed everything. His name was Jim, and he was 7 years older than me, and he seriously turned my life around. He lived in another city, but he often came to my city on business trips. We fell for each other quickly. That happiness didn't last long, though. One day I was working in the clothes store when a girl around the same age as me came in. She wanted my help to choose some dress, but she was pretty rude to me and I kept catching her staring at me with evil eyes. Who was she? And why was she treating me like that? Finally, after about 2 hours, she made up her mind and picked up only a tie that she wanted to buy for her husband instead. I was relieved to get rid of her, but shocked when I saw the name on her credit card. Jim Stewart. Her husband had the exact same name as my boyfriend. What a coincidence. She must have caught me staring at the card because she suddenly said, "Yes, Jim is my husband. Now stay away from him." What? Her husband? My Jim. Before I even had a chance to react, she turned to everyone in the store and said, "This girl is a gold digger, and she's trying to break up my marriage." I was shocked. I tried to explain that it wasn't true, but she wouldn't listen to me. She just stormed out, and I was left standing there hearing people whispering about me. It was the most humiliating moment of my life. I immediately ran to the staff room and called Jim. I was really hoping it had all been a big misunderstanding, but I could tell from Jim's tone that it was the truth. He told me he'd lied to me, and that he actually lived in the same city. He just made up the business trip stuff so he wouldn't have to see me often. Then he said, "Audrey, I honestly love you. I'm serious about us." Hang on, was he for real? It was ridiculous. I was disgusted by him. How could he treat me like that? I hung up and felt horrified. It brought back horrible memories of the woman who stole my dad away from my mom. I didn't want to be that woman. The next day, I moved out of the house Jim had rented for me. I didn't want to be associated with that loser anymore. But life works in mysterious ways. The day I moved into my new house, I saw Jim's wife. And you won't believe it. It seemed that she just moved in next door too. Was this some kind of joke? As soon as she saw me, she smirked and said, "Wow, what a coincidence. Hello, neighbor. I'm Linda." Seeing her unpacking her stuff all by herself, I couldn't help but wonder where Jim was. But then I thought maybe Linda had ended things with him and had moved here alone. I hope so anyways. I'd hate to have Jim as a neighbor. So that's when my new life began. And it has been crazy ever since. From that first week of living there, Linda started pranking me. It all began with her throwing trash into my yard. I even caught her doing it, and she just grinned and said, "Oops, my hand slipped." Then she walked away laughing. It made me furious. And that was just the beginning. One weekend, a delivery guy rocked up on my porch with 10 extra large pizzas. I tried to explain I hadn't ordered them, and that's when Linda appeared at my door and said, "Oh, thanks for ordering me dinner, Audrey. I'm starving." Then she grabbed 5 of the pizzas and ran to her house, leaving me there with a bill of $100. Jeez, it was so annoying, and I had no option but to pay. Linda was too much. Seriously. As much as her pranks drove me up the wall, I also felt sorry for her. I knew what it was like to have someone you love stolen away from you. She must have hated me so much for ruining her marriage, even though it hadn't been my fault. I decided to just put up with her pranks. She'd get over it eventually, and it's not like they were harming me, right? Well, one night I heard the doorbell. I wasn't expecting anyone and was surprised to see a young guy standing there with a poster that said, "I agree to be your boyfriend. Come out with me." I was totally puzzled and told him he had the wrong house, but then he showed me the address on the other side. It was my address. What on earth? I told him I wasn't interested, but he tried to grab my hand and said, "Come on, girl, don't be shy." I told him if he didn't leave me alone, I'd call the police. So luckily he ran away. Needless to ask, I knew for sure that was Linda's joke. But this time she had taken it too far. I decided to go over and have a word with her once and for all. As I was walking to her house, I saw someone familiar on the other side of the road. I couldn't believe it. It was my dad? So many years had passed, and he'd completely changed, but there was no doubt it was him. I suddenly blurted out, "Dad?" But I didn't know what to do next. I was just thinking about my next move when I felt someone behind me. I turned around and saw Linda. She just smirked at me and walked away. What was her problem? Did she hear what I just said? I was so shocked at seeing my dad, I ran back into my house. I hated him for what he'd done to my mom. But he was still my dad, and I wanted to know if he was okay and what he was doing here. I barely slept that night as I couldn't stop thinking about my dad. The next morning, I was sitting by the window when he appeared again. This time, he was with Linda, and she was holding his arm. What was she doing with my dad? Why were they so close? Later that day, I saw him again, and this time, he and Linda were hugging. OMG, were they dating? Maybe Linda had heard me call him dad, and now she was flirting with him to truly get revenge on me. This was too much. The thought of Linda as a stepmom made me want to puke. I waited and waited, but he was inside her house and there was no sign of him leaving. Eventually he left, and as soon as he was in his car, I ran over to her house. I was shaking as I knocked on the door, and as Linda opened it, I said, "You are way too much. Can you just stop with the revenge already?" Linda looked confused and said, "What the heck are you talking about?" Linda still didn't seem to get it, and I was about to explain when I heard footsteps. I turned around and my dad was right there. He said, "What's the matter, Linda? Why are you fighting with this stranger?" Huh? Stranger? Didn't he recognize me? Then Linda butted in and said, "It's okay, Dad. We're just having a misunderstanding here." What? Dad? Is he your dad? Really? I stammered. "Yeah, why? What's the matter?" He said, "Linda, you don't need to lie to me. I know you're dating my dad to get revenge on me," I continued. "Whoa, hold on. What do you mean your dad?" Linda gasped. At that, my dad looked confused too and walked to me and asked if he could look at my hand. After seeing my birthmark, he started crying and hugging me. "Audrey, it's you. It's really you." I didn't know how to react, so I just let him hug me. It had been so long since anyone had held me like this. Ever since my mom had died, I'd tried to be strong and keep it together, but suddenly I couldn't hold back anymore. I burst into tears in his arms. We stood like that for a long time, and eventually he took me into Linda's house and told me the story. It turned out, after he left me and my mom, he got tricked by that woman, and he was so ashamed. He decided to move to another city and start over. He was working hard on a construction site one day when he got injured, so he ended up in hospital. And that's when he met Linda. She'd been in a car accident and needed a blood transfusion urgently. She has a pretty rare blood type, but luckily my dad had the same type and he volunteered to give her a transfusion. After that, they became quite close, and seeing as Linda had lost both her parents in the car accident, my dad eventually adopted her. I couldn't believe it. My dad had been through so much, and this whole time, I thought he was off living his life with a rich woman. I felt so bad for him and decided to leave the past behind and forgive him. As for Linda, she was also left confused by this coincidence, so she left the room to process everything, while I and Dad took time to catch up on our lives. Later, Linda prepared dinner for us three, and before we digged in, she shyly grabbed my hand and said, "Audrey, I've been so awful to you. I'm sorry. I know you aren't the one responsible for my divorce, but I still felt upset, and that's why I played all those pranks. That was so childish, right? Please forgive me, sister." We laughed it off, then hugged each other to make peace. I couldn't believe it. After all these years of being lonely, suddenly I had a sister, and my dad was back. My life had finally turned a corner, and I almost laughed at the thought that it was all because of meeting Jim. At least one good thing had come out of that disastrous relationship.
Hello, guys. It's me again, Haley. In the last episode, after saving me from a sudden tantrum of Dean's wife, Eric disappeared again with no reason and couldn't even be bothered to answer my calls. In addition, the constant wave of criticism from anti-fans made me even more depressed. Now, my career was on the rocks, along with my relationship with Eric. Worrying for me, Anna and Kurt jumped on a plane to visit and stay with me for a while to make sure I was okay. Then one night, Anna received a phone call saying that Kurt had gotten into a fight and was at the hospital. We rushed there to find the place swarming with paparazzi. Were they here for me? But how did they know that I was coming? Whatever, I needed to go check on my friend right now. On the way to Kurt's room, we passed an open door, so I peered inside. And surprisingly, I saw Eric sitting on a bed and a nurse was tending to his bloodied nose. Will and Clara were also there. He was busy on his phone. She was standing next to Eric. Immediately, Anna and I looked at each other. That explained the paparazzi mob out there. And surely it couldn't be a coincidence that both Eric and Kurt were here, right? On seeing Eric, my heart tightened. I just wanted to run over to him and be by his side, but he just turned away as soon as his eyes met mine. Sensing how I was feeling, Anna took my hand and pulled me away. When we came to Kurt's room, we hurried over to him and asked if he was okay. Fortunately, he only had a few cuts and bruises. Then I said, "Glad you're okay, Kurt. Now let's get out of here first. I don't think we should stay here for long." Right at that moment, Phil arrived. News traveled fast in Hollywood, and he'd read about the fight on the internet and came straight here to find out what had happened. We left via the back door to avoid the news-hungry reporters. Once we were safe in Phil's car, Anna grew impatient. "Now, can you tell us the whole story? What happened? I thought you were going to see your friend's band." Kurt grimaced. "Geez, let me catch a breath first. I'm starving now after all that fighting. Let's go grab something to eat. Then I'll tell you about it." Anna reluctantly nodded in agreement, so Phil drove us through a nearby drive-thru. Then, while munching on his burger, Kurt started the story. "The thing is, I was at the concert, and Eric too, as you can tell. Halfway through the show, I went to the bathroom and bumped into him, but we just ignored each other. Then as I was leaving the men's room, I heard a familiar voice down the hallway, so I stopped for a second and realized that it was Eric talking to his manager, saying, 'All right, I'll do as you wish. I'll cut things off with Haley.'" "Oh my, did he really say that?" Anna exclaimed. "Yes, that was what first popped up in my mind too." Kurt continued. "You guys, I was so mad that I ran over to him and punched him right in his dumb face. That's how we ended up fighting. Haley, I warned you before. Eric only wants to feed off the perks of your fame. The first sign of trouble and he's off." Anna and Phil also agreed with Kurt and showed their strong dissatisfaction with Eric. As for me, I just gazed out the window and felt so heavy-hearted. It's the same as it was years ago. And here I was, heartbroken all over again. Anna patted me on the shoulder and asked if I was okay. I laughed and said, "It's okay. I'm fine. Nothing he does surprises me anymore." Even though I'd told her that, I couldn't shake the feeling in my heart that there was more to this story. Maybe Kurt misunderstood what was said. I mean, he's always been hot-headed and somewhat hostile toward Eric. That night, I couldn't sleep. Instead, I scrolled through my phone and reminisced on old pictures of Eric and me. We looked so happy back then. Now it was such a mess. My tears kept pouring out until I fell asleep. I woke up late in the next morning and lazily reached out for my phone. My eyes widened when I saw Anna's Instagram post. There, laid out for the world to see, was the story of Eric and me, including our blossoming love back at high school, how I'd asked his now manager to give him a chance, supported him by flying out to LA, and always being there for him when he needed me, and how in return he'd betrayed me, not once, but twice. To back this up, she'd also attached lots of pictures of Eric and me looking all loved up. Anna's post had gone viral, and there were already hundreds of comments from fans and followers. Most of them were sympathetic toward me and unkind to Eric. Then I read some of today's news stories, which exposed Eric with the headlines, "Eric the Betrayer," and "The True Face of Eric." I felt a pang in my heart. I know he messed up, but I didn't want this to happen to him. I called and messaged him immediately, but he didn't answer. OMG, why was everything so messed up? I ran to the kitchen to find Anna making coffee, as if nothing had happened. I waved the post in her face and said, "Anna, what have you done?" She just shrugged and replied, "He deserved it, Haley. I wasn't going to stand by and watch your career landslide because of that jerk. The world needs to know the truth. You can't just take this all on yourself alone." I then begged her to take the post down, and eventually she agreed to. Not that it made any difference, as everyone had already seen it. I didn't agree with what Anna had done, but I couldn't blame her for doing it. She just wanted to protect me and hated seeing me so upset. And her plan worked, as I was no longer portrayed as the villain in the media's eyes, and the number of followers on my fan pages also increased significantly. Things seemed to simmer down after a few days, and I've decided that I just needed to erase Eric out of my mind once and for all, as all these dramas have been taking up too much time for me to work on my music. But then one day, I arrived home from the studio to find Will waiting outside my apartment. He told me that he wanted to have a private talk with me about Eric. I didn't want to deal with any of this, but I didn't want to cause a public scene either, so I told him to come inside. As soon as we sat down, he glared at me and said, "I hope you're happy with yourself, as you've successfully damaged Eric's career for your own selfish needs. But remember that he's the star, not you. And unless you do something to rectify this, I will make sure you're never hired again." I was furious. How dare this man come into my home and threaten me? Okay, you can try what you like, but blaming me won't work. It's all on you. Eric told me everything. I know that you and your company forced him to date Clara. He sneered. "You silly little girl. You think Eric did it because I forced him? Obviously not. He's a grown man, and he's smart enough to know that if he denied that dating rumor, then it would affect his duet project with Clara, and also their reputation, so he just went along with it, and even asked me to help cover up this fake relationship. He chose fame, not you." I sat there speechless. I didn't want to believe what Will was saying, but how could I not? He said exactly what I doubted about. At the first sign of trouble, Eric left me and ran to Clara for his own good. And this time, history repeated itself all over again. After Will left, I felt so empty inside. Nothing, just me, staring into a void, trying to deny this reality. But what's the point? Everything was meaningless now. So, in sorrow, I went to a bar in town and started drinking in order to forget my troubles. The next thing I remember was Anna showing up. Turns out she'd called me, but I was too drunk, so the barman took the call and told her to come and pick me up. The next morning, I woke up on the couch with a terrible headache. Anna was asleep on the beanbag next to me. She must have been so tired from taking care of me all night. Thank you, Anna. You're an amazing friend. I covered her with a blanket and prepared her a glass of milk with a thank you note. Then I went out for a walk to refresh my mind. I put my headphones in and let the music guide me. Before I realized it, I'd wandered over to Daystar Records. I smiled as I reminded myself why I came to LA in the first place. It was to make my singing dreams come true. I'd come so far, and that was down to hard work and determination. I couldn't give up now. I could get through this, I thought to myself, then took a deep breath of fresh morning air. But then I saw someone lying on the doorstep of the studio, clutching an empty bottle of wine. I peered down at them. Eric? Why was he here? I immediately turned around and started to walk off. I couldn't keep on letting Eric pull me down. He's just a stranger to me now. That's what my mind told me, but my body didn't listen. Before I could stop myself, I rushed back over to him and gently shook him. Hey, wake up, Eric. You'll catch a cold. He woke up, looked around, then appeared startled when he saw it was me. He looked so bad, as if he had something going on, and he had suffered a lot in a short amount of time. Then, with pleading eyes, he said, "Haley, please, I need to talk to you." Hey, it's your girl Nicole back again. So, my mom couldn't deal with my truancy anymore, so she packed me off to live with my dad. The problem is, he's the principal of a snooty school that barely has any female students, and he forced me to attend it. The school needed to get with the times and be more female inclusive, so I started a girls-only club called The Doll to get us noticed. It was all going well, but then Dad let the news slip that I was his daughter. By first break, everyone in school knew who I was. Soon, kids who'd never spoken to me before were offering to help me with my homework, and the teachers seemed nervous around me. I get it. Nobody wanted to be seen quarreling with the principal's daughter. Even the grumpy canteen woman completely changed too. Now, she even gave me double portions of chicken. It sounded good, right? Nope. Instead, it was kinda annoying. Then on top of all this, my friends started doing crazy stuff behind my back. They put lipstick kisses on random lockers, snuck into the faculty room and set up a doll's tea party, and then they did the biggest prank of all. Yep, they actually went into the gym hall and hung up garlands of panties, bras, and tampons alongside a massive banner saying, "Welcome to the girls' world." Wow, even I thought they'd gone too far with this one. My dad was fuming about it. I was terrified they'd get expelled. There were barely any girls in the school as it was, without me losing my only female classmates. But they ended up getting a week's worth of detentions and were made to stay behind after school and clean up the gym hall. Phew! The next day, my friends came up to me while I was at my locker, and Angela said, "Detention sucks, but that prank was so worth it. Just wait till you see what we've got planned next." She winked. "It's definitely going to be a washout." Carly chuckled. Enough was enough, so I told them to inform the rest of the doll to meet me in the gym after school. Okay, so I may have sneakily taken the gym's key out of my dad's pocket, but it was for the greater good. Now I had all of the doll together. I said what I needed to say. "Hey girls, look, I know this school favors boys, and it's understandable you want to be seen, but all these pranks are making us look bad. I know my dad, and the only way he's going to listen to us is if we do something that gets across our point in an honorable way. So I'm going to run in the next student council election." Before I'd even finished my sentence, Carly said, "But that position is only for the boys." So I replied, "I think it's time we change that. Don't you? So, who's with me?" To my surprise, All of the girls in the room raised their hands and cheered. After that, I launched my campaign. The 2 candidates with the highest number of votes would go through to the final round. At first, I didn't get much attention, but then this wasn't surprising, as I was the only girl competing. The other competitors took it super seriously. One boy handed out free t-shirts with his name on them, and another stuck leaflets on everyone's locker listing 10 reasons why he was the right person for the job. No way. I needed to come up with a plan. So I came up with a familiar but extremely effective strategy called Beauty Trap. Ha! No boy could escape it. One of my main focuses was that I wanted to put the buzz back in this school and make it inclusive for all. So I took that one step further, and me and my team dressed up as cute bees and handed out homemade black and yellow cupcakes. Then, whenever a boy spoke to us, we winked at them, handed them candy, and told them it was just for them because they were the cutest. And it worked. Of course! I made the final 2, and it came down to me against Brandon, this super smart guy. So now all I needed to do was work on my presentation, which I'd give in the schoolyard. How boring it was! So a bright idea crossed my mind. Why didn't we combine the finals with a prom night, where students could not only vote for the potential president, but also dress up and socialize? I told my team about my amazing idea, but to my surprise, they looked doubtful. The teachers will never let that happen. They are so anti-parties, it hurts, Carly said. You just leave this to me. I smirked. My dad may have been strict, but he was no match for me. So that night after dinner, I told him my plan. At first, he was so surprised and didn't agree, as he said that we couldn't combine the election ceremony with a singing and dancing party, as it would take the dignity out of it. Ugh! My dad was stuck in the past. So I said, but Dad, it'll be a good opportunity for all the students to hang out with each other. Me and my friends will decorate the hall, find a DJ, sort out the food and drink, and do everything else. I know you have your reservations, and I get that, but prom is an important event for us teenagers. We learn so much from them: how to dance, how to feel good about ourselves, how to mix with each other. Plus, we need this, and I promise I won't let anyone spike the punch. In fact, we won't even have punch. It took a lot more pleading and persuading, but eventually he sighed, then said, Fine, you can have your prom, but don't let me regret it. I squealed in excitement, then rushed over and hugged him. He looked shocked, as thinking about it, this was the first time I'd hugged him in, well, years. I have to admit that it kind of felt good. I instantly messaged the group with my good news, and they replied with memes, love hearts, and dancing emojis. And the talk soon turned to what we were going to wear. See? Being friends with the daughter of the principal had many advantages, right? I'm not going to lie, organizing a prom was hard. But luckily for me, I have amazing friends who helped me all the way. Carly sorted out the decorations and found a DJ, and Angela was in charge of tickets. The night of the prom finally arrived. And wow! Everyone scrubbed up well. The doll members gave a welcoming dance performance, then Brandon and I went up on stage to give our presentations. Brandon went first, and geez, he's Mr. Serious. But he is cute. He went on about improving the nutritional value of school meals, organizing more school trips for the chess, math, and sports clubs, and doing more to help the climate crisis, such as raising money, recycling, and producing solar energy to lower the school's carbon footprint. It sounded convincing, right? But it was a little bit boring. He was such a nerd, albeit a cute one, and I had to pretend to itch my nose so I could secretly yawn. I heard clapping. Oh no, that meant it was my turn, and I wasn't prepared. The prom had taken up my time and... what should I say? That's when I looked over at my dad, who was standing at the back of the room, and I saw him nod at me. So, I took center stage and decided to let my heart do the talking. Hi, guys and girls. Some of you may know me as the rebel girl who stirred up trouble when I first arrived here, while others may just know me as the principal's daughter. The truth is, I'm just a normal student like the rest of you, one who had some major doubts about coming here. I could hear some people whispering in the crowd. but I kept calm and carried on. I didn't think I'd like it here, but it turns out I was wrong. I've made some amazing friends, and I've grown to really kinda like this place. However, the outdated attitude toward the female students frustrates me. Times have changed, and we belong here too. So it's only right we have our own uniform, clubs tailored for us, and please, no more bench presses. Girls are just as good as boys, if not even better. For example, we, the awesome girls in the doll, set up this party all by ourselves. Together, let's make our high school life more brilliant and inclusive for all, because this school has something special, and I want everyone to see that with a little care and attention, it can truly buzz. Wow, I'd done it. All of the students cheered and applauded. Even Brandon patted me on the shoulder and said, "Well done. Your presentation was so convincing. You've got my vote." Then he winked at me. OMG. What did that mean? After that, I joined my friends on the dance floor and made the most of the amazing dance we'd organized. Finally, it was the results time. One of the teachers went on stage with the envelope containing the winner's name. Then she opened it and said, "With 2/3 of the votes, you've chosen your winner, and it's Nicole." I couldn't believe it! I'd done it! I'd actually won! When I walked off the stage, Dad came over and hugged me tight. Then he said, "Darling, I'm really proud of you." And that was it. Now I'm the president of the student council, and as I promised in my presentation, I'm making this school an inclusive place for all. Now we have more activities for girls, including a cheerleading club. Although, of course, boys can join too. We even have a girls' uniform, so I don't have to wear those hideous baggy pants anymore. Now, everyone seems happier here, including me. Mom heard about my change in attitude and invited me to come back home. But I can't go back. I belong here in this school with my new friends. Maybe, just maybe, I do love this place after all. Who'd have thought it? It's crazy, huh? I used to think that being beautiful meant I'd sail through life and always get whatever I wanted. Yeah, I know this sounds dumb, but back in high school, life was so much easier down to my good looks. All it took was a flutter of my eyelashes, and the nerds would do my homework for me. And girls invited me to their parties because they knew me going meant the cute boys would go too. It was nice having attention from other boys, but I was only interested in my boyfriend, Logan. He was a senior, and he was just perfect. He was so handsome, super smart, and a sports pro. There was one teeny tiny problem. I sucked at studying. It was just so boring. But to be honest, it didn't matter anyways, as I was beautiful. And you know, being beautiful was enough. Besides, I did have one passion. I love singing and composing music. I don't publicize them or anything, but I'm not gonna lie, they were quite catchy. We had one long summer together before Logan went off to college. So I decided to surprise him with a love song I'd written for him. I showed up at his house with my guitar, ready to play it to him, but before I could start it, he said, "Ailey, I want to break up." What? Why? I spluttered out. "I've met someone else. She isn't as beautiful as you, but she's smarter. We're going to study at Stanford together. Let's face it, a place like that's way out of your reach." I couldn't believe what I just heard. I grabbed his arm and begged him to give our love another chance, but he just walked away. During the next few days, I kept calling and texting him, but he ghosted me completely. Feeling desperate, I searched for his girlfriend's info on social media and found out her name was Jolie, and she was one of the top students of another high school in the city. And OMG, how could he fall in love with such an ugly girl? Oh, turns out Logan wanted a smart girl, huh? So if I got into this college, then he would take me back, right? I mean, surely he'd pick a smart and beautiful girl over a smart, ugly one. That settled it. I was going to work my butt off for my senior year to get into Stanford. Geez, studying was way harder than I anticipated. It didn't help that I had loads of catching up to do. And why did Logan have to study economics? All the numbers and graphs made me feel super dizzy. I didn't know where to start. Everything was new to me, so I had to ask a couple of my nerdy admirers to help me out. At first, they actually laughed at me as they thought I was kidding. But when they realized I was being deadly serious, they handed me some books and tried explaining stuff to me. I even spent my break times in the library. Ugh, why was it like a maze in there? I swear I got lost and couldn't find my way out for at least an hour. One time, I even fell asleep in the library, and some dude thought it was funny to take a picture. And for days after that, everyone at school passed around the photo of me drooling on a pile of books. Ew! But despite those hardships, I couldn't give up. I even stuck a photo of Logan to my wall to remind me of my goal. I stopped hanging out with my friends and didn't go to any more parties. And I even missed prom to study. Needless to say, my friends really thought that I was insane or something. Even my mom was so worried that she wanted to take me to the hospital to be checked over. OMG. How ridiculous. Stop overreacting, people. Have you never seen a hardworking, beautiful girl before? And then something crazy happened. I received my letter from Stanford, and OMG, guess what? I got in. I couldn't believe it, and neither did my family and friends. Everyone was so surprised and happy for me. To be honest, giving up on music was a pity, but studying music wouldn't help me get Logan back, and this would. I was going to be at the same college as him, studying the same course, albeit a year behind. What could possibly go wrong? So, I moved to college and ended up with the geekiest roommate ever. She actually plastered math equations onto the walls. Ugh, what a weird girl. Moreover, studying here was even more boring than in high school. Much more. One time during a macroeconomics class, yep, it's as boring as it sounds, I had my earbuds in and was thinking up song lyrics when someone knocked on my desk. How dare they interrupt my creative flow? So I blurted out, "1 second, I'm writing," while my eyes were still on my notebook. Then I looked up to see Professor Bentley standing there. He snatched my notebook, saw my lyrics, then told me, "Get out at once and never come back." Whatever, I was sick of this snooze-inducing subject anyway. Seriously, watching paint dry would have been more fun. I stormed out of there, ranting to myself about how I hated his lame class, when I turned a corner and saw Logan holding hands with his ugly girlfriend. Ugh! Why now? Logan stared at me like he'd seen a ghost, then asked, "Haley, what are you doing here?" I forced a smile at him, but before I could say anything, his girlfriend spoke out. "Oh, you're Ailey, my boyfriend's infamous stalker? Let me guess, Professor Bentley kicked you out? Figures, as he's allergic to brainless girls." Then she dragged Logan away. How dare she mock me? I was far too beautiful to be spoken to like that by the likes of her. I was going to show her. I'd soon win back my man. I went back to my room and listed some ideas. I could buy him a gift. Nah, too obvious. Or I could tag him in pictures of us together. Nah, too desperate. I know. I should stick to what I'm good at. In my case, that's music. Besides, how romantic would me singing a love song to him be? He wouldn't be able to resist. Some days later, I took my guitar out into the yard. A crowd began to gather around me, so I said, "I wrote this song for my ex, Logan. Just wanted to say that I love you so much. Will you be my boyfriend again?" Everyone around me cheered, and it made me even more excited, and I started singing. After I finished my song, Logan and Jolie appeared. He looked awkward, and she looked so mad, I thought steam might come out of her ears. Whatever, I didn't care about her. I shimmied over to them, then touched his shoulder. "Honey, I worked so hard to get into the same college as you. Now, will you come back to me?" Then, to my surprise, he angrily said, "Illy, please stop. We're over. You're crazy. All of this is crazy. Now, please, leave me alone. I stood there gobsmacked as he took Jolie's hand and they walked off. I could hear the crowd whispering about me. I felt like my world was falling down. I was moping on my bed, daydreaming about happier days with Logan, when my roommate threw her phone onto my bed and said, "You might want to see this." I looked at it. What? It was me. Someone had filmed my failed serenade attempt, and now I'd gone viral. But the majority of the comments were super supportive, saying I had an awesome voice. After that, everyone in college knew my name. Okay, so all the attention felt good. Due to popular demand, I ended up releasing my song. Even the student council of the college invited me to join a performance at the school celebration. My college life just got better, as I was doing what I loved, and I made new friends. But I felt far from ecstatic, as I hated my course, and I still hadn't won Logan back. One evening, while I was stretching on the couch and thinking about Logan, a text arrived. It was from a strange number. They told me to hurry over to the dorm yard, as there was something wrong with Logan. There was a huge crowd gathered there. Oh no, this must be serious. Frantically, I pushed through them, and that's when I saw Logan standing there with his back to me, in the middle of a candle heart shape. He must have sent me the message. I shakily walked toward him, and then softly called his name. He turned around, got on one knee, but his face was still fixed on the ground. Then, to my surprise, he said, "I really love you and want to be a part of your life. Will you marry me, Jolie?" Oh. Wait, what? Jolie? I shouted. He looked up at me and loudly said, "Ailey, what are you doing here?" Huh? What was going on? I looked back, and that's when I saw that some of their friends were standing behind me with some affectionate photos of Jolie and Logan, and also banners saying, "Will you marry me, Jolie?" Okay, so this clearly wasn't for me. Suddenly, Jolie appeared, and in a mocking voice said, "First you stalk my boyfriend, and now you ruin our proposal? Get real! He doesn't want you." Before I could say anything, Logan yelled at me. "Oh, Ailey, please stop it. I'm begging you. Stop being so obsessed. It makes me sick. I don't love you anymore, and I'm never going to want you back." I stood there totally mortified. I heard the crowd jeering at me and taking photos. I quickly ran away with tears streaming down my face. I angrily dialed back the phone number that had sent me the message, but it was blocked. This must have been someone's idea of a sick joke. A week later, my phone buzzed. What? It was from Logan. I quickly opened the message. "Hi, Ailey. Look, I found out that Jolie sent you the message to meet at the yard. My friend let slip to her about the proposal, so she came up with that prank to embarrass you. Your behavior made her feel very insecure, and although it was wrong what she did, you brought it on yourself. Please move on and find happiness, as this isn't you. Your actions have made you ugly, and you've lost yourself." I burst into tears because I knew he was right. I gave up on my passion and applied for a course I had no interest in, and all for this guy that still didn't choose me. Now it was time to give up on Logan and this college. After all, neither were right for me. I might be beautiful, but looks alone don't buy someone's love. There's so much more to it than that. For now, I've moved back home, but I'm going to put my heart and soul into my music, then apply to a music school majoring in composition, because I finally realized that it isn't Logan who will make me happy. It's my passion. I kicked off my heels and threw my handbag down on the table. Geez, I'm so tired. Should I quit this job? I thought out loud. I hoped my friends were home, as I needed to vent. I was about to lie down on the couch when I suddenly saw a shadow go toward the bathroom. I took a closer look. There was a man doing something in my bathroom. Was our place getting robbed? Panicked, I grabbed one of my heels, then rushed forward and hit him with it. "Thief! Thief! Hazel! Ivy! Thief! I shouted out as I continued to slam my heel into him. He held his head and kept saying, You misunderstood! I'm not... Suddenly, my two friends rushed over, but instead of helping me tackle the intruder, they pulled me off of him. Maya, stop! Hazel said hastily. He's with us! Oops. I put my heel down and gave a sheepish look. Well, thanks for the heads up. Then Hazel asked the guy if he was okay. He didn't say anything. Instead, he just glared at me before he walked out of the room. Suddenly, Hazel and Ivy were pulling me toward the kitchen table for a chat. So apparently, they decided to find a new tenant, and this Wesley guy was the chosen one. Geez, it would have been nice if they'd run it past me first. I mean, I did live here. I frowned at them, told them they sucked, and that I didn't want to live with some random guy. Maya, we didn't tell you because we knew you'd act like this. Hazel sighed. But with the rent increase, we have no choice but to bring someone new into the mix. Besides, you have to admit that Wesley is nice to look at, Ivy said in a dreamy voice. Whatever! I crossed my arms. And no, I don't think he's in the slightest bit good-looking. Hazel grinned as she said, No, because he now has heel imprints all over his head. I rolled my eyes, then grabbed my handbag and headed toward my room. I didn't want to live with some dumb guy. But thanks to my totally unreasonable friends, I didn't have much choice. The next day was Saturday. Thank God. So I slept until noon, then lazily went down to the kitchen to get some leftover pizza. Huh? Where was it? I knew Ivy and Hazel were too calorie-obsessed to touch it. It could only be Wesley. He was watching TV in the living room, so I went over to him and asked loudly, Did you eat my pizza? How dare you? Without looking away from his show, he said, Yeah, I threw it in the trash. He did what? Then he continued, You left it in the fridge to go bad and spoil all the other foods. Please don't do that again. Huh. Where was my apology? He'd thrown away my lunch, and now he dared to challenge me? How annoying! I was about to give him a piece of my mind when he handed me something and said, I made a list of house rules. I looked at the first 3 rules. Number 1, wash up all your dirty dishes straight after use, then thoroughly clean the basin. Number 2, write your initials on all your food and drinks and don't steal anyone else's. Number 3, shower time is 10 minutes maximum. Then clean the bathroom before leaving. What? Was this guy for real? Who in their right mind had the time or patience to write their initials on everything? I frustratingly replied to him, No way am I... Wesley interrupted me. 4 people are living here, so the majority vote goes. I smirked at him. I knew for sure that Hazel and Ivy would never accept those stupid rules. They liked the messy, grab-it-and-go lifestyle even more than me, and Ivy spent at least an hour in the shower. So we all gathered in the living room, and Wesley handed out his rules. But to my surprise, Ivy only flicked out her hair, then said, Okay, Wesley. And Hazel fluttered her eyelashes and said, Sure, these rules seem great. Geez, what was wrong with these girls? He wasn't even that handsome. Unfortunately, my love-struck friends' votes meant that I was outnumbered. I had no choice but to follow Wesley's ridiculous rules. The trash takeout rotation was so confusing. What was wrong with leaving it to overflow? I missed my slot, so Wesley stuck a Post-it note to my door saying, Take the trash out at 6 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and 7 p.m. on the other days. It's not difficult. W. Ugh. Who even used Post-it notes in this day and age? He was such a loser! Also, I have this box for my random items, hair slides, pins, keepsake tickets, scarves, and so on, which I kept in the living room. It didn't matter where I moved it. Wesley shook his head and mouthed the word no at me. Yep, you guessed it. He stuck another Post-it note to my door, this one saying, No personal clutter in the communal areas. W. In the end, I stuck the box into my closet so it was out of the way. Living with Wesley was a nightmare, especially when I finally quit my job at that lame law firm, which means I had to stay home with him pretty much all the time. This guy was just too meticulous. If any of us dared place anything in the wrong place, he glared at us and said, "That isn't where it lives." Couldn't I put the TV remote on the arm of the couch if I wanted to? I pay rent too. I didn't want to live in a model home. One time, I was chilling in my room when I turned around to see Wesley standing there. He looked around my messy room, shook his head, then picked up my bra from the floor. I immediately snatched it out of his hand and hid it. How embarrassing! "Hey, why is your room so untidy?" He tutted, then grunted out before leaving. "Clean up right now." How dare he come into my room and order me about? I stomped out to the living room to confront him about it. But before I could do so, I was dumbfounded at the sight of Ivy and Hazel in the middle of a cleaning frenzy. Ivy smiled over at Wesley and said, "Isn't this shiny?" Then Hazel asked him, "Do you need me to move anything?" Jeez, it was like they had a spell cast on them or something. Then Wesley looked at me and said, "Maya, your friends have grasped the importance of keeping our living environment clean. So why can't you?" Fine. If Wesley wanted me to change, then I would. Just not in the way he expected me to. It was time I took being messy to a whole new level. I started by moving things around. Then I rubbed the initials out on his can of soda and wrote on my own. Then I settled down for an afternoon watching a movie on the couch, my feet up on the upholstery, of course. Yep, I also dropped popcorn all over the place. I couldn't help but giggle as I heard Wesley's disgruntled moans coming from the kitchen. Then I heard a cupboard slam and he appeared in front of me. "Maya, that's mine." He picked the soda can off the floor and examined the altered initials. "And this goes on a coaster on the table. Ugh, I can't stand it anymore." He swatted my legs down. "I'll be your cleaner, but I'm charging you for it." "Sure, Wesley, if that's what you want." I smiled before I threw a piece of popcorn into the air, and it missed my mouth and landed on the couch. He muttered under his breath as he picked it up and marched over to the trash can. Hey, this could be fun, especially as I had no intention of making it easy for him. I left a trail of candy wrappers around the house, dropped crumbs on the couch, and purposely didn't take my sneakers off at the door, so I got mud clumps everywhere. It was so funny watching him squirm as he cleaned up after me. Then one time, when I knew he was in an online work meeting, I barged into his room and dropped an armful of my dirty laundry on his floor, then fled. He was so mad, but couldn't move an inch since his boss was talking. Then suddenly, I got a phone call. Weird. It's from a guy at the law firm I'd worked at. Turns out, they're short-staffed and asked me to come back to work until they find someone else. But you know what? I was too sick of that job, so I politely declined the offer. But suddenly, he yelled at me with words like, "Don't be so full of yourself. You should have been grateful for this offer, because I don't think you'd be able to survive one day in the world out there. You're irresponsible, unorganized, and lazy. Have fun being jobless." Then he hung up, leaving me speechless. I felt so terrible. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. "I'm sorry about earlier, but I'm really not in the mood right now, Wes," I mumbled upon seeing Wesley walk into my room, probably to scold me about the pile of laundry. But instead, he sat down next to me, passed me a tissue, and told me that I may be the messiest girl ever, but I deserved better than that shitty job and shitty boss. "Trust yourself. I know there's more to you than this. And maybe, if you find the right job that you're passionate about, who knows? You can even become the most organized and diligent girl ever." He teased me to brighten up the atmosphere. Okay, so maybe Wesley wasn't all bad. After that, I decided to try and be a teensy bit tidier from now on, but not too tidy. Later on, he stuck a Post-it note to my door saying he wouldn't be cleaning up after me tonight, as he was going out. I asked the girls where Wesley was, and they looked disappointed, as they said he went out all dressed up and mentioned something about a date. Why did I feel a knot in my chest at the thought of Wesley on a date with some other girl? I couldn't like him, could I? Nah, how could I like someone that particular? I watched a movie to push away those strange feelings, and then went to bed. Only, I found myself unable to sleep. So at about 1 a.m., I went and got a glass of water. That's when he returned. I asked him how his date went, and he looked really awkward, muttered something out about how she was just a friend, then lingered on the spot there for me to finish so he could wash up my glass and put it away before he went to bed. Okay, so that was weird. The weirdness continued for the next week. Wesley continued to clean up after me, but he couldn't even meet my eye, and whenever I tried talking to him, he ignored me, then hurried off. Then, one time when I was in my room, I heard footsteps by my door. I knew it was him with one of his dumb notes again. So I pushed open the door to see him standing there, red-faced, then shouted at him, "Why are you avoiding me?" He blushed and looked at the note he'd just stuck to my door. Quickly, I read it. "I'm sorry I've been avoiding you. The truth is, you're the messiest girl I've met in my whole life, but I still can't stop thinking about you. W." What? Did he like me too? I pulled him into my room to talk about this, but he looked at the mess and shook his head. "That doesn't live there." He gestured to the coat thrown on my bed. "Give it a rest." I rolled my eyes before I pulled him closer to me and kissed him. And we've been together ever since. As much as it pains me to say, it turns out that this messy girl can't live without her cleaning-obsessed guy. But then they do say that opposites attract. Who knew that bonding over Post-it notes and spoiled pizza could lead to something more?
I was swaying to the music with the hottest girl at school in my arms. Everything was perfect when suddenly I saw a flurry of red storming toward me, and then the next thing I knew, I was being slapped across the face. Ugh, it was my ex, Rosie. She was looking at me as if she wanted to snap me in half. Okay, so Rosie and me had only broken up yesterday, but that didn't mean she had the right to go full psycho on me. Hey, so I'm Andrew, and I like to think I'm a pretty smart guy. The problem is, I'm a sucker for hot girls. I tend to be blinded by their beauty. The result being, I don't always make the best decisions around them. But I had no idea what drama my weakness for a pretty girl was about to get me into. So it all began with the end-of-term college party. Me and my friends went heavy on the drinks. So when my friend Brad bet me a burger that I wouldn't go and ask Lisa to dance, well, I didn't hesitate in approaching her. Geez, she's so hot and way out of my league. So I was expecting her to tell me to go away, but instead she smiled and let me lead her over to the dance floor. While we were dancing, she whispered in my ear that she'd always liked me. Then, yep, you guessed it, Rosie, my crazy ex, stormed over and slapped me. I woke up the next morning with a pounding headache. Ugh, what was all that shouting coming from outside my open window? I wrapped my bed cover around me and shuffled my way over there to take a look. Lisa and Rosie were yelling at each other. "He's mine, not yours. Stay away." "He wants me, not you. Deal with it." "Oh yeah? Well, maybe we should ask Andrew who he prefers." "What's the point? As we both know he'll pick me." I was far too hungover for this, so I closed the window and went back to bed. These girls, they wouldn't stop. For the next few days, they bombarded me with messages and waited for me outside my house. Okay, so most guys dream of two hot girls fighting over them, but trust me, watching them pull each other's hair extensions out isn't as glamorous as it sounds. Thankfully, my prayers were answered by none other than Richie, my awesome brother. He showed up with a ticket for a luxury 2-week cruise trip. He'd booked it ages ago, but then a work thing came up, so the ticket was all mine. Hell yeah! I hugged my brother, grabbed the ticket out of his hand, and started packing. The tricky part was sneaking past Rosie and Lisa, who were still lingering about outside. So I borrowed my housemate's hoodie and baseball cap and pretended to be him to get past them. Result, they didn't even double look at me. Goodbye to my Lisa and Rosie nightmare and hello to the vacation of my dreams. Ah, this is the life. Trust my brother to book such a lavish place. My room was huge and it had my very own balcony. There was so much to do here, from the outdoor bar, dozens of restaurants, swimming pool, cinema. I was on my own floating complex. Heaven. The next morning when I woke up in my king-size bed, I took in the sounds of silence. Yup, oh sweet silence, how I've missed you. This was a no-girl arguing zone. I got changed and walked over to the outdoor bar. It definitely wasn't too early for a cocktail. I had a pair of shades on, and that's when I spotted her. Whoa, she was beautiful. I quickly ordered 2 cocktails and began walking toward her. I was about to hand her the drink when I tripped over a sun lounger, and in slow motion I watched the cup fall. I desperately tried to grab it, but nope. Instead, I managed to knock into her back. She let out a yelp and then yelled out, "You pervert! What do you think you're playing at?" I stood there open-mouthed, contemplating if I should dive into the pool to escape this drama or not. Then I looked down at my sunglasses, which in all the action had fallen off. Suddenly, an idea came to me. So I bent down, stretched out my arms, and pretended to fumble around for them. She looked at me for a while, then picked my sunglasses up, placed them in my hand, then said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. Here, let me help you." Then she took my arm and guided me across the pool area. I thanked her. And then, with my trusty shades on, I watched her walk away. So she thought I was blind. Yep, this wasn't my greatest idea, but it got me out of a sticky situation with a hot girl at least. Later that night, I went to the buffet restaurant for dinner. I was stacking my plate when I bumped straight into someone and almost dropped my plate. Ugh, it was that hot girl again. I quickly put my shades on, then deliberately turned the wrong way and loudly said, "Oh, I'm sorry." She put her hand on my shoulder and guided me so I was facing her, then said, "Yeah, it's me, the girl from the pool. And it's okay, I should have been looking where I was going. Do you need any help?" I quickly cut her off. "No thanks, it's okay." Then I lifted my plate up to my nose and sniffed it. These prawns sure smell good. She raised an eyebrow at my food-smelling talent, so I carried on pretending to sniff the food as I put it on my plate. And you know what? She wouldn't quit staring at me. Eventually, she walked off. Phew, what a narrow escape. Afterward, I went to the top deck bar to chill out, with yet another cocktail. Then who should walk over but, yup, you guessed it, the hot girl. I immediately looked away from her, but what's this? She walked over to me and sat down opposite me. "Hey, do you remember me?" she asked. Seeing my chance to flirt with her, I replied, "Oh yes, how could I forget someone as beautiful as you are?" "Huh? How do you know that I'm beautiful?" Damn it, I needed to think before I spoke. "Ah, well, it's your voice. A sweet voice like yours can only belong to a beautiful girl." Crisis averted. As after that we started chatting, and oh boy, she's a sweetheart. Do you know that she's an activist for an organization that works hard to guarantee the rights of baby girls born in Africa? I know, amazing. The evening came to an end and she said, "Oh, my name's Bella, by the way." I replied, "Bella, a name as beautiful as your soul. Mine's Andrew." She gave me a nervous giggle. "Well, Andrew, it's getting late, so I suppose I better get back to my cabin." I didn't want the night to ever end, so I blurted out, "Whoa, Bella, look at the sky. Isn't it so stunning?" She glared at me and then replied, "How would you know that?" Oops, of course, I was meant to be blind. I can feel it from the breeze." She gave me a quizzing look, then said, "Right, well, good night. How about we meet at the arcade tomorrow, let's say 10 a.m.? I excitedly agreed, then she left. Another close escape. I really needed to be more careful. Bella, Bella, Bella. I couldn't stop thinking of her. The next day, I'm such a kid when it comes to arcades, I can't help it. My inner child comes out and, ooh, a car racing game. Nope, I was pretending to be blind. So I awkwardly lingered in the foyer and waited for Bella to show up. When she did, she took my arm and guided me through the arcade. She described all the different games machines to me, which I thought was really sweet. Then she led me over to the plushie grabber machine and squealed excitedly. Hoo-hoo, I loved these as a kid. Soon I was fumbling about to slot my money in, adamant I was going to win her a plushie. But wait, I was meant to be blind. So I touched the controls, then closed my eyes. Her laughter said it all. Massive fail. It was all going to be okay until Bella had to use the restroom and instructed me to stay put and wait for her by a shooting game machine, which just so happened to be my all-time favorite arcade game. I rushed over to it as soon as she was out of sight, grabbed a gun, and shot 5 cannons in a row. Then I jumped up and down and whooped in the air. I turned around and saw Bella frowning at me. Oh boy, busted. I tried to explain, but she just shook her head and said, "How could you? You're a coward, a pervert, and a liar." Then she ran off. I felt terrible. I tried searching the ship for her, but I couldn't find her anywhere. Feeling bummed out, I ordered a cocktail, then went for a walk across the deck. Suddenly, I heard shouting coming from below me. Huh? What was that? I peered down and saw a man and a woman trying to drag a little girl into one of the safety rafts. Hang on, they weren't alone. Bella was there too. She was trying to pull the little girl away from them. Without even thinking, I dropped my drink and ran over to them. I charged towards the woman and knocked her so hard she almost fell into the sea. The man reached out to steady her, which gave Bella a chance to pick up the kid. Then she grabbed my arm and pulled me away. After that, the bad guys jumped into the raft and sailed away. We returned the girl to her parents. It turns out Bella was on her way to her cabin when she saw a couple in tears as they couldn't find their daughter. So she went looking for her and walked in on the kidnapping. After that, Bella forgave me. Well, I did save the day and all. And we spent the rest of the trip together. Then on our last day, I got down on one knee and asked her to be my girlfriend. And she said yes. I took her back home with me, and as we walked over to my house, Lisa and Rosie ran towards me and started arguing with each other about who I liked more. Oh shoot, I'd forgotten about them. Reading the situation, Bella approached them. Thank God you're here. I assume one of you is his girlfriend, right? There was an accident, and Andrew's blind now, and he really needs someone by his side 24/7. Hearing that, I quickly coordinated with her by waving my arms wildly about. So, which one is your girlfriend, Andy? It's Lisa. Rosie quickly chimed in. No, he's all yours. We only hung out once. Ha, what suckers. I watched them run away. Then Bella and I burst out laughing. After that, I held my arm out to her and let her guide me home, for old time's sake. Lying to her about being blind was a jerky thing to do, but I only did it in the first place because being around beautiful girls makes me so nervous I do dumb stuff. It's just lucky that Bella forgave me, because I think this dumbass may have found his dream girl. Hey, Alex. I felt someone tap on my shoulder. I turned around to see who it was and, it was Roxy, my crush, who also happened to be the most beautiful girl in the world. I figured I must have been in her way, so I quickly mumbled out, sorry, and stepped aside. But out of my surprise, she smiled at me and said, So, a little birdie told me you like me? I think it's cute you haven't made a move on me yet, not like most of the guys around here. I stared at her open-mouthed. Was I dreaming? I pinched myself to check. Nope, this was real. So I nodded my head and muttered out, yeah? My friend's having a party at their frat house on Wednesday. You want to come? Before I could reply, her friend Luke appeared, and grinning, he said, Yeah, you just gotta come to this party. Roxy hit his arm while giving him a dirty look, then smiled at me. So it's at number 19, starts at 9 p.m. I'll see you then? I nodded in response, and she said, Great, see you there. Then she winked at me before she walked off. So yeah, I'm Alex, your average second-year college student. And this is the story about how my crush tried to lure me into a seriously sinister trap. I guess I'm a normal guy. I'm not as rich and popular as the kids from the frat houses are. Instead, my room is in the regular dorms, and although I'm not ugly or unpopular or anything, I'm easily overlooked. So I kept my crush on Roxy a secret because she was way out of my league. She was so beautiful, this was crazy. How did she even find out that I liked her? I couldn't believe that she'd asked me out. This was mad. At first, I felt like the luckiest guy ever. But then as I watched Roxy walk back to her friends, I noticed them giggling, except for this one girl called Sophie. Meanwhile, Luke was making everyone high-five him. He was always a little odd, and he spoke to people in strange ways. Then I caught Sophie's eye, and she gave me a look that said, Don't. Then she promptly looked away. Her jerky boyfriend Jack had his arm around her shoulder and was tugging on one of her trademark pigtails as he glugged back his drink. I had no idea what she saw in him. But what had her look been about? Back in my dorm, I discussed it with my roommate Ben, and he said it sounded like a setup. As much as I wanted it to be legit, my gut instinct was also saying that it was too good to be true. So the night of the party, I decided to take a look out my dorm window, as it's in the perfect location to get a clear view of the frat houses. I counted the houses down to number 19. Then I took out my binoculars, for which I used for field research studies, to take a closer look. The house had a large rainbow pride flag hanging from the two windows. This made me wonder why Roxy would want to go to a gay party. I saw a lot of feminine-dressed men, and the only two girls that I could spot were far from attractive. And it seemed like they were a couple. And then there was Luke in the front yard holding 2 drinks and looking around like he was waiting for someone. Where was Roxy? I decided to check her social media to see if she'd posted anything. And I noticed she'd left her location open. She was in a nightclub, Diego's. That was strange. So I gave the party a miss, and instead Ben and I went to a student bar. I told him about it, and he said it sounded like I dodged a bullet. The next day I was sitting with Ben and some of my other friends in the canteen when Roxy stormed over to me and yelled out, How dare you stand me up? Who do you think you are? Luke appeared and said, Yeah, why not show? I just shrugged and said, Roxy, I know you weren't there. Your phone location's public. You were at Diego's. She hesitated, then said, yeah, my friend borrowed my phone. But what you did was so creepy, you stalker. As if. Roxy was never without her phone, so I wasn't buying her story. This whole thing didn't make any sense, so I sort of mouthed out, whatever, Roxy, then carried on eating my lunch. After that, she started making my life a living hell. She told everyone that I was stalking her, so random students started coming up to me and telling me to leave her alone. Then someone covered the dorm corridors in leaflets with a picture of my face and the word stalker written across them. I knew Roxy was behind it. It was so weird. But Luke was worse. One time after class, he sneaked up on me, grabbed my arm, and said, Hey Alex, why you bail on my party? I told him that I saw the party from a distance and it wasn't my thing, so he replied, Hey, you got a probs with me being gay? I shook my head and told him I didn't, but he still wouldn't let go of my arm. I was relieved when he finally let go of me, and I hurried back to my dorm. On the way, I spotted Sophie sitting outside on the shared bathroom. Hang on, why was she in the flood of tears? I asked her if she was okay, but she told me to go away. Although I didn't want to put my nose where it shouldn't be. But I wasn't heartless, so I left her my bottle of water before I walked off. I said, If you want to talk about it, I'm here for you. I was unlocking my dorm room when I heard someone cough behind me. I turned around to see Sophie standing there. She thanked me for the water and she said she wanted to talk. I led her into my room and she sat on my bed. And staring at her feet, she said in tears, I caught Jack and Roxy by the locker rooms, but when I confronted them about it, they just shooed me away. I sat down next to Sophie and hugged her. This was horrible. It looks like I've been so wrong about Roxy. She wasn't my dream girl at all. Instead, she was a nightmare. Sophie continued, It gets worse. Roxy stole my assignment and submitted it as her own. It's due tomorrow and I don't have the time to write a new one. She started crying again. I passed her a tissue and said, We'll sort this out. There's no way she's getting away with it. That's horrible. So I told her to send an email to the college dean and to her course tutor explaining what happened. She'd attached the original assignment and all the notes she'd written about it. They both got back to us within minutes and said that they would look into this. Sophie looked so delighted, but then suddenly her smile dropped, and she fiddled with one of her pigtails as she said, Alex, there's something I need to tell you. Please don't hate me. Then she told me how the party Roxy had invited me to had been a trap. Roxy found out I had a crush on her, and she was embarrassed that an average guy like me dared to have feelings toward her. And she was adamant she needed to teach me a lesson. So that's when Luke said he would help, as he wanted to add me to his collection, so they hatched a plan. Roxy invited me to the party, and Luke was waiting for me with a spiked drink. Apparently, this was Roxy's way of silencing me, and making sure I didn't look at her in the same way ever again. Whoa, this was so dark. I shivered at the thought of what could have been. It was terrifying. Sophie also told me that she begged Roxy not to do this, but she got her friends to hold her down. Then she told her that if she intervened, they'd make her suffer. I comforted Sophie and told her that it wasn't her fault. I knew I couldn't just stay quiet on this, as they could do this to some poor other guy who dared to have a crush on her. So with Sophie's help, we wrote a letter to the dean and to the college security about what had happened. This wasn't going to be taken lying down. Sophie was terrified that Roxy and her friends would come after her, so I invited her back to my hometown for the weekend to get away from everyone and let things cool down. When we arrived back at college, news spread that Roxy had been expelled for stealing another student's work. As for Luke, the cops raided his frat house and found loads of banned substances hidden in there. It was so serious that it went to court, and they ended up in jail. As for Jack, he tried to guilt-trip Sophie as to why she should get Roxy expelled for dumb reasons, but she stopped talking to him anyway. I often think back to the night of the party and what could have been. My life would have been ruined, and what for? All because I dared to have a crush on a beautiful girl. I say good riddance. Some good has come out of this whole mess. Sophie and I grew closer and started dating. Now we've both graduated, and that's not all. We have 2 amazing kids together. I love my beautiful family with all my heart, and I just want to protect them from all the bad in this world. So in short, I don't think that just because you're beautiful, rich, and popular, that you get to get away with doing whatever you please. Regardless of age, sex, looks, and so on, everyone deserves to be treated with respect and compassion.